Hello, my name is Scott Glasser. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with the AWS Nonprofits team. I specialize in working with nonprofit institutions and organizations to help them on their cloud journey. I am pleased to introduce Marcelo Santana today. Marcelo is the CIO of MDRC, and I'll ask him to tell us a little bit more about MDRC in just a moment. But first of all, I've been working with Marcelo about a year and a half now, and I've gotten to appreciate his many talents and skills. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Marcelo. First of all, he is a nonprofit executive. That means he's accustomed to doing big things with small teams and small budgets. And that's an exceptional skill, and he'll provide some insight about that today. He works with a variety of government and agencies and NGOs. So he works with U.S. federal government, state governments, local governments, tribal organizations, tribal governments. So an amazing diversity of experience in working with the government ecosystem. And that requires some special skills. He works in an organization that does public policy research. So people have a lot of opinions about public policy, and so their work gets a lot of scrutiny from a lot of different places, and it has to really stand up. It has to be done securely. It has to be done safely, and so he has an exceptionally keen eye for security and compliance issues. And he works with researchers. As probably you figured out, researchers are really brilliant people, and they're really opinionated. So he spends a lot of time working out what the researchers need in terms of tools and data so that they can do their job well. And he has a tremendous amount of IT knowledge and experience. And so whenever we need to dive deep, he can be right there with us with the technical people. So with that, Marcelo, I'm delighted that you could be here with us today. I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself and particularly about MDRC and about what you do as an organization.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for having MDRC here with you guys at the AWS Summit. MDRC is a social policy research institute that was established in 1974 with the mission to build knowledge, evidence about what works for the low-income individuals, families, and children. And we were founded by a group of federal agencies that came together and established our organization almost 50 years ago. And we pretty much work across the entire United States, all over the 50 states, and we evaluate social policy programs. Right? Think about welfare, think about food, supplemental food programs. We analyze all of them, and we gather evidence of what's working, what's not working. And even though our initial concentration had been in welfare, across all these decades, we end up expanding the domains of studies, and we end up tapping education, labor, criminal justice, and many other areas. We perform a lot of data science analysis. We grab data from different participants of these programs. We enrich that data with administrative data that comes from the agencies. And when we talk about agencies, we're not just talking about federal agencies, because we also work with agents at the state and local and tribal levels. So we enrich that data. We create a body of information that allow us to crunch the numbers and the data that come from the participants and from those agents, and from private data provider as well. Putting it all together in a space where we can then generate insights and then share those insights with policymakers, which are the ones who actually primarily consume the result of our research, and then they steer, they adjust, they fine-tune those programs so that they can keep improving the lives of the individuals, families, and children that participate in this program.
Yeah, it's so important to have that data-based analysis of public policy to figure out what works, where to invest, where to double down, and where and what might not be working so well. So important as a guide to policymakers. So you've been at this for a little while, a few decades. Um, what led you to, if you can think back a few years, what led you to think, well, we need to do something differently? We've had success all these years, but something is changing. What led you to start thinking about specifically about cloud and AWS cloud?
Right. Well, the primary driver had always been modernization. Right. As you know, in government, in the public sector, and even in nonprofits, right, there is this mindset of not changing what's working. Right. While it provides a certain level of stability to the work, to the research, it also little by little creates what we call the technical debt, right? Where when you have to actually upgrade, when you have to upkeep your infrastructure, your processes, and inject more appropriate technology, then it becomes a really, really difficult task. Right? So continuous improvement became more and more a super important element of our technology practice, and that was the primary driver. We About 4 years ago, we also moved in our headquarters here in New York. We established in New York. We have offices in D.C., Washington, D.C., and we also have a presence in the West Coast, in California, Oakland, and L.A. As we move our headquarters here in New York from Midtown to downtown, we also decide to move our data center to a co-location facility, and from there create a stepping stone to move to the cloud. And that's when we started to work with AWS about 3 years ago, 3 years and a half ago, and we started to decide on which workloads we would move to the co-location facility, which ones we would then from there move to the cloud. And initially we started testing things in the commercial cloud, and then as we gain more maturity, then we transition to the Gulf clouds.
Right. So, as I understand it, um, there's obviously, for organizations that don't have cloud experience, there's a lot of perceived risk and a lot of concern that people have about if they can do that safely. It sounds like you used a number of measures to mitigate that risk, to manage it, to be sure that you're really comfortable and competent in the cloud before you started moving mission critical workloads there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, as everything, right? We walk before we ran, and that's why we created that two-phase approach where we move some of our workloads to the co-location facility because that would mimic the data center that we had in-house, and then from there we move certain non-critical workloads first to the cloud, and then that was followed by the more critical workloads. So that staged approach helped us a lot to gain knowledge and also to mature our cloud engineering practice, along with all these cybersecurity aspects related to the cloud.
Right.
Yeah, in parallel with that, Scott, we also decide from a strategic perspective, right, to budget our project, our initiative, in a way that would not only consume the cloud as a utility, but we also would operate like a learning organization as part of the broader initiative of being a learning organization. We decided that we should mix, right, the outsourcing of the infrastructure with in-house knowledge that we would keep collecting, so that we could have the confidence that we could operate the new platform in a sound manner and with resources that we could count on a regular basis. So mixing them was really important.
Okay, and when you're thinking about mixing them, what were your criteria in deciding what you wanted to develop in house versus where you reached out for outside help from maybe AWS professional services or expertise from the AWS team or other services?
Yeah, well, when our team started to work with cloud engineering, in particular with the aspects related to AWS, it was clear that there were certain aspects of automation or certain aspects of protecting the network that were very new to them. So in those areas that we definitely had a knowledge gap, we decided to tap some outside expertise coming from Amazon directly via the AWS professional service, or from the tech vendors that were part of the Amazon Partner Network ecosystem. Because we started to consume some solutions and integrate some of those solutions with the GovCloud setup, and we started to rely on them. And of course, by establishing a close relationship with you and the Amazon team, we were also able to plan how to bring in some more advanced expertise directly from the product managers from AWS directly. And I think that was paramount for our success with the GovCloud.
Yeah, I remember that our service teams were very interested in what you were doing and your use cases and how we could help you in this research space. And we also happen to have some expertise in the compliance area that we brought in to answer some of the questions that require that kind of expertise and background. And so if you look at that, and you mentioned automation as one of those key services that you used, again, to get that small team to do big things. What were some of the approaches you took or services you used in order to automate the process and be able to scale up what you were doing without having to grow a huge team behind it?
Well, first of all, being a government contractor established a lot of constraints in terms of the solutions that we can bring in to our technology platform, right? We definitely leverage key service from AWS in terms of automation. I would say that CloudFormation was probably one of the key elements, and the ability to mix and match with the marketplace, the GovCloud marketplace solutions that were there. And the reason for that is because we embrace a government framework called FedRAMP to operate in the cloud, right? And by doing that, we had to observe and make sure that we're in compliance with a risk framework called NIST 800-53. And in order to do that, it was essential for us to leverage solutions that were already in the GovCloud marketplace because they already had been cleared for certain cybersecurity elements and compliance elements that are approved by the government.
Right. So, yeah, that was a real challenge because you took advantage of AWS services. You augmented those because your research community needed some things that were available in the marketplace. And by using Marketplace on GovCloud, you knew you were picking up compliant solutions. And that was it. That allowed you quickly to equip your research community with the tools they need without sacrificing security and compliance. So yeah, I really I was impressed by the way you sort of threaded the needle on how to achieve that speed and agility that you needed and get the services you need with that rich tool set for researchers. Now you mentioned FedRAMP and NIST, and I know from dealing with different types of government agencies and multiple agencies, they all have slightly different ways of doing business. Did you find that you had to do kind of a one-off for each different type of producer and consumer of information, or were you able to converge more on a couple of fairly standard ways that gave you good coverage from a security and compliance perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. Well, in the course of doing business with the government and across multiple jurisdictions, we end up dealing with enormous risk management frameworks and compliance and regulatory bodies of law that we have to observe. Right? And as we move along, and as we also establish data sharing agreements with multiple providers beyond the funders, beyond the agencies that take part in the cohort of the studies that we're working with, we we end up with this mix, right, of mandates that we have to comply with. We kept observing that 800-53 provide some elements of a common denominator for us. By observing 800-53, it was possible for us to, at least initially, harmonize all these different risk management frameworks and compliance and regulatory mandates that we had. And that's one of the key reasons why we embraced NIST 800-53. And of course, because we started operating in the cloud and we started to make our platform available to multiple agencies, to multiple bureaus, to multiple other agencies, right? That state, local, tribal, that were operating with us. We needed to make sure that the platform that they were making available to them was also vetted to the government, so that third parties could operate on them, and that was essential for our decision about FedRAMP. One thing that maps very well to the AWS Cloud Marketplace is the fact that the GSA has a marketplace for FedRAMP approved solution, accredited solutions. So mix and matching, right, the solutions there in the market, in the FedRAMP marketplace, and make sure that they map to the GovCloud marketplace was really, really essential for us to succeed, and make sure that we would clear our way in order to operate with these different solutions, these different APN partners that we were bringing in to compose the mosaic or the design, the architecture that we're putting together in the GovCloud.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a moment ago CloudFormation. And I know with customers who are new to the cloud, the whole idea of infrastructure as code is really brand new. And it seems like you embraced it and adopted it really quickly and really effectively. Could you tell us a little bit more about what CloudFormation and other automation tools for systems management, how that helped you with respect not only to your ability to scale your team, but also to maintain compliance and security in your environment?
Yeah, sure. Well, the key driver there, Scott, is what you mentioned a couple of times. Right? We have a very small team, and we need to do big things, right? Studies that operate across all over 50 states, studies that operate with multiple federal agencies, multiple agencies in different jurisdictions. So it was essential for us to be able to scale things up and down as we needed with a small team. Right? And the only way to do that is via automation. Infrastructure as code is essential for us because once we plan, design, and deploy a certain structure in the cloud, then it makes it possible for us to take it down if needed, or scale it down if needed, and then recreate it or scale it up when we need it, right? With minimal or no human intervention. And that allows us to replicate our framework, our platform in a much more productive and effective way, especially with a small team. And there are studies that we conduct that cut across the entire country, but then at certain point we end up actually bring them just to a small number of zip codes or jurisdictions. So that ability to expand and contract, it was essential for us via CloudFormation. Also, the cybersecurity element is essential. Right? When you spin up multiple cloud resources like database, compute nodes, containers, and etc., along with that comes a set of controls, safeguards that need to be in place, like secure groups, like VPC, like network filtering, logging, monitoring, right? Connectivity for special purpose services. So for all of that to take place in a way that is you minimize potential human mistakes, CloudFormation played very well. Sometimes I keep saying that the CloudFormation was, if we're in a game, CloudFormation would be our MVP, right, for that game. And of course, with great other players like ECR, ECS, and the marketplace by itself.
All right, and so just summarizing that journey, you needed to move faster. You needed to have a tool-rich environment, a lot of data moving through it, more and more data over time. You had to maintain that security and compliance. You had to work with different data providers and get different data consumers, and you had to do it with a small team on a small budget. So did it work out, and what was the outcome for you in terms of that cloud journey? Did it deliver the things that you were hoping it would?
Yeah, it definitely did. But I think the FedRAMP accreditation for our organization is probably the biggest manifestation of that result, right? It's sponsored by the largest civilian agency in America, HHS. We got a credit last year in June, and we have been operating. We received the authority to operate with our cloud platform using the name Sprout, Social Policy Research and Operation Unified Technology. And since then, we have been applying it to multiple studies, to multiple cohorts, and more we're bringing in new projects and new studies and new agencies to reuse our platform as they leverage our studies, our demonstrations, our technical assistance programs, and of course our insights, our analytics, and our findings in general.
All right, fantastic. And so, I mean, that's a remarkable accomplishment. And we've spent a lot of time looking back on that journey. As you pivot toward looking ahead and what comes next for you, what do you think the big next steps are in expanding your mission, expanding your capabilities, and how can AWS help you get there?
More and more, Scott, as we evolve, it becomes very, very clear, right? That even if we had an army of developers, security experts, operation experts, we would still be challenged by the sheer amount of information that keeps flowing at all times, right? Think, for example, from a cybersecurity perspective, there are so many signals coming in at every microsecond, right? That you have to keep monitoring, that you have to keep parsing in an effective way so that you can quickly decide on how to handle it and how to actually reply to that, right? And automation by itself helps, like we mentioned CloudFormation, we mentioned containerization via ECR, ECS. But if we don't bring in a little bit of artificial intelligence or a way for that information to be automatically analyzed at a certain level, that would spare our staff members to decide on the more high-level aspects of our mission and our operation, the better we will be. So our next step definitely is about bringing in automatic ML, not only from a cyber perspective, but also from a core business perspective. Right? We are foundationally a data science organization, right? We collect data, we process data, and then we perform some analytics into that data so that we can generate insights for policymakers to allocate budget or to steer the programs that they manage. By doing that, we apply different kinds of statistical models, different kinds of data science models, And more, it's very clear that given the essential, ever-changing nature of data these days and how you can mix and match them in data lakes, that a particular model doesn't fit all needs. So the ability to actually parse the data, test different models, and then establish a dialogue with the data science or the cybersecurity experts in a way where they could interact using machine learning algorithms according to the profile of the data or the data lake that they have at hand, that will bring us better results, right? It's just like having a portfolio of models or machine learning models that keep being rebalanced as the profile of the data changes, right? Finding momentum in the data and finding appropriate angles for the analyst, the human being, right? To actually look, slice, dice the data in a effective way that's aligned to the outcomes that we want to bring to the policymakers.
All right, Marcelo, that's a great way of summing it up. And if I think back to what we've talked about over the past hour, you talked about your journey into the cloud. You talked about the challenges of having to move faster with more data and a rich tool set of working with different types of governmental agencies and their needs, the need to stay secure and compliant, the need to manage risk, the need to do things in such a way that you made sure that you knew what you were doing in the cloud before you went all the way into it. The way that you brought in expertise from people like your account team and the service team and AWS professional services and the partner network and the marketplace, the way you use different standard frameworks so that you could do it once really in terms of your security and compliance. The use of automation and infrastructure as code to scale a team. So many things you succeeded at there. And your vision forward for how you're going to use AI and ML to scale, not only from continuing to maintain vigilance in your security posture and protect that data and protect the trust that you've earned from these many agencies going forward, because that trust obviously is essential to you. And the new tools and techniques that you're going to use for that, both in the security posture and your core business. It's really amazing what you've accomplished. To congratulate your team and you for your leadership in this, and I thank you for sharing those insights and thoughts with us today.
Scott, that was a great summary, right? I couldn't have summarized it any better than you just did. Again, I thank you, the AWS team, for having me and MDRC here today in this conversation and the ability to share our experience with you and, of course, the entire audience. We look forward to interacting more with anybody who is interested in the work that we're conducting, and actually anybody who is interested to team up with us in leveraging that platform for their social policy research studies or any kind of government work that they work with. We are a nonprofit organization, so we can make it available and customize it to the mission that is needed. And if you want more information, you can find us at mdrc.org, our website, or just send us an email at sprout, SPROUT, at mdrc.org, and we're going to be very happy to interact with the interested parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you.